the question on why culture impacts the bottom line, I like the implication that at least there's an awareness it does. I run into a lot of executives that don't really understand that strong connection between the health of an organization's culture and the success of the business overall. But it's very clear in all the data that we've produced, the research we produce, there's a strong correlation there. It's possible to have a financially successful company and a horrible culture, but that happens in about 0.01% of companies and is the hard way to do it. The easy way to do it is let's create a great culture internally, and generally that manifests itself out to the customer base and to the success of the company. What we've seen over and over again is the more an organization can improve employee well-being, employee engagement, in general good feelings about the culture itself, you'll tend to get as an organization that discretionary effort. You'll get an employer brand that attracts the right talent. You'll retain more talent overall. So there's significant benefits to having a healthy culture, or what we call a fit culture, to the market performance of the organization. I think we're getting to a high percentage, but it's still not as high as it should be. Nobody knows what percent of CHROs are labeled strategic versus non-strategic. But if you've got an organization where the CPO isn't reporting to the CEO, that's a big red flag to me, and is usually an organization where they don't necessarily view the people function as strategic. I think a lot of HR leaders inherently know the importance of culture overall. Typically the catalyst to change culture comes from a new CEO entering an organization. It comes from an acquisition, usually a larger acquisition for the organization, or unfortunately it comes from poor results, where they have to change something, and they recognize that the culture is detrimental or contributing to those poor results. Those are typically the catalysts for culture change. I think most CHROs, if a CEO comes to them and says, hey, I think we need to improve our culture to improve our bottom line, they're going to nod their head knowingly and say, yes, I know we do. And I think that's the benefit of the HR audience that we have today. They understand the importance of culture to the organization. I think the job of HR is becoming more challenging right now, mainly due to external factors that are affecting the workforce. We've all seen the Middle East conflict, and that is currently dividing a lot of workforces, thrusting HR into the middle of it to act almost as arbiter or referee in some cases. But it is starting to come to a head. We've just recently, Google fired over 4 protesters in their organization as a result of that. And because this is a big election year, in fact it's being called the year of elections, there are more major elections going on around the world in 2024 than any other time in history, particularly in the United States. We're seeing a lot of strife inside the workforce. So that, coupled with the war in Ukraine and other external factors, are creating an environment where I think we have to be very cognizant of how do we unite the workforce, how do we allow conversations to happen but emphasize respectfulness with those conversations. A lot of conversations are not respectful right now in companies, and I think HR is struggling with with being thrust in the middle of that. So I feel for HR these days. It's not an easy time to be in the profession, for sure. I think another area that's been really challenging for the HR field is diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've seen a major backlash over the last couple of years, particularly right now, against the field. I really feel for any diversity professional, particularly chief diversity officers, and how they're getting through this, because it's not easy. And I commend so many of them that are staying the course, are working towards goals that they've set inside their organization, in creating a more diverse and inclusive culture. There's no getting around the fact that the more diverse and inclusive you are, the better the company performs. And I don't understand why that sometimes gets lost in this rhetoric of woke and pushback on DEI. We have to not lose sight of the fact that the most diverse companies and companies that have inclusive cultures, they do better than their competition. End of story. And so it's a tough time, but it's certainly rewarding to those who are pushing through it.